I'm going to remove the cam covers so I can gain access to the cam gear timing marks. Now I'm going to turn the crank to make sure that my cam gear timing marks are pointing up. With the cam gear marks up, I can line my crank up to 0 on my timing mark on the front of the cover. Now we don't want to turn the cam by the end of the bolt because it has a very low torque. And the earlier 4.7s came without VVTs, so it's still the same setup. Now we're set up to remove the timing belt. Now if we do this, that way we don't have to have any problems with trying to move our cams, and all our alignment marks is ready to reinstall the new belt. Now on our left cam, I've got it just a little bit past the timing mark. That gives us a little slack on the lower end. Down here on our crank, see our crank is lined up perfect. That gives us a little slack to do some movement with. Now here I've got my timing mark about in between the T and the timing alignment. That gives us enough slack to go around the water pump, and we'll take up the slack when we put our tensioner on. Now we're ready to set up our timing belt tensioner. You see there's a hole through the shaft and through both sides of the tensioner housing, so we're just going to make sure they're lined up. That shaft will turn back and forth. Now we're going to make sure we reinstall our dust boot. That'll keep it from getting any moisture or anything down in it to damage our timing belt tensioner. Now here we're going to set up our vise. Now this tensioner, it's made with a heavy spring inside, and it's got an orifice and a ball check valve. That way it'll move in very slowly but come out real quick. So you don't want to be in no rush to push it back. You can feel the vise as it loosens up, and you can feel the actual tensioner as it loosens up inside there until you move it back and get the holes to align all the way through. Now what I'll normally do is give it like a 2 count. 1001, 1002, 1001, 1002. Now the tensioner is designed under heavy acceleration. It'll give some slack to the belt, and that'll help prevent the belt from snapping. And then on deceleration, it'll return back to home. This will prevent the timing belt from jumping a tooth on deceleration. Now if you'll notice that your tensioner is actually loosening up, that gives you a good indication you can add more pressure with your vise. Now I'm going to check and see if my hole's lined up. Now I don't want to go too tight, so I'll check and see if it's still got some loose play in it. And we can put our retainer pin in. Now with our retainer pin, you can feel on the other side where the rubber dust boot, where it's contacting it and won't push back out. You know you got it right. Now we don't add no pressure to the retainer pin, just let it set, and then ease your vise back off and you're in good shape. Now if you look at this, you'll notice that the retainer pin is not pushing out on the rubber. You do want the rubber to be pushed out. It'll make it harder to install, or you may not even be able to install it at all. Now we're ready to install our timing belt tensioner. Now you're going to want to loosely start your bolts, run them up our several threads before you go to tighten it down, and then you're going to shift back and forth, pulling your tensioner up a little at a time with the bolts, not to strip any one or to cock your tensioner sideways. Now I'm going to take and start to tighten up the bolts, and as I feel tension gather on one, I'm going to switch to the other one, vice versa, back and forth until I pull my tensioner all the way till it bottoms out. Now I'm going to switch to a low torque ratchet. Now that I feel comfortable, I have enough threads not to strip the bolts out, and I'm going to swap back and forth as I bring my tensioner up to the base. Now once I have my tensioner pulled all the way up snug, I'll finish tightening it with a wrench. Now that I got it pulled tight, I'm going to go ahead and pull my pin. And we can check and make sure all our alignment marks are in line. Now here I'm going to temporarily reinstall my crank pulley. That way I can tighten up my timing belt. I'll move it clockwise to tighten up the timing belt, and then back counterclockwise to align all the timing marks. Now you don't want to use any kind of pliers or anything on your crank. I'll take and dust off the rust with a wire brush inside the crank pulley. That way it'll slide up on there easy, and just bring it up until you feel it meet with the alignment pin. Now you don't want to use sandpaper because it'll close the tolerances up on the crankshaft and the crank pulley. Now we're going to make sure all our teeth is seated in the gears. They're all square on the pulleys. And we'll check and make sure all our alignment marks second chance to look to see if anything is out of place. I want to thank you for watching. Now we'll put her back together. Hope this helped you out.